It's time to have a conversation about a big black man, a bigger, blacker gun, and the biggest, blackest sword. Except I'm not entirely sure that metaphor works here. The remake. A few days ago, Square Enix announced something that people have been waiting for what, 20 years now? Basically, they're going to do a full HD, current generation overhaul of Final Fantasy VII and bring it back into the limelight for current gen consoles like PS4 and Xbox. It's entirely possible that Final Fantasy VII is the most sought after video game remake in history. And of course, an announcement trailer dropped for it at E3, and people just went absolutely apeshit because Square has been teasing things like this and really kind of dragging Final Fantasy VII along and beating it like one does the proverbial money tree for quite some time. They enjoyed just an outrageous amount of success when the original game came out. And, since then there have been dozens of other spin-offs, if you will, to kind of milk that success, from Crisis Core to Dirge of Cerberus to one or two different remakes. I know they remastered it and released it for PlayStation 3, but it was just kind of an HD overhaul. It wasn't a full remake. Some of the original sprites were made to look a little bit better. But it certainly wasn't anything to phone home about, and a lot of people were really kind of pissed off about it. Add to that the fact that rumors and shadowy quotes on the internet have pretty much said that Square won't redo Final Fantasy VII unless the company needs that kind of a boost. And here we are. Square has gone on quote. Several of their high-ranking staff members have gone on quote saying that they wouldn't even consider redoing Final Fantasy VII until they had already built games that had surpassed it. And I don't think any of them have yet. Not a single Final Fantasy game has splashed since 7 that has made that kind of an impact. Don't get me wrong, I really, really enjoyed Final Fantasy VIII. Never really played Final Fantasy IX, but I know a lot of people really, really like it. And then, as far as I'm concerned, the games have been relatively forgettable after that. My nephew assures me that Final Fantasy X is worth a playthrough, but I can't see Meg Ryan as the main character in a Final Fantasy story, even if they chose to call her Titus or Titus or whatever the hell that name is supposed to be. In any event, there was a launch trailer with it. I'm not going to bother giving it my usual treatment because there's really not a whole lot to look at in the launch trailer unless you count like the last 3 seconds. Of course, the graphics are gorgeous and reminiscent of Advent Children, though at this point, if Square doesn't do even better than that, I'll be hugely disappointed. And based on the images that I saw, their engines have definitely improved over the ones that we saw in Advent Children. So definitely excited about that, but in the last 3 seconds or so of the trailer, of course, you see Barrett from the back with a great big old gun strapped onto his arm, and then you see Cloud from the back with a very, very detailed, very beaten up looking Buster Sword on his back, and then it fades to credits and a brand new shiny buffed metal Final Fantasy VII logo and the word remake. And that's really all that there is for the teaser. I have to say, while the teaser visually was beautiful, and nobody does cinematics like Square does, voice work for Japanese trailers is awful. Maybe it's a cultural thing, I don't know. Voice work for Japanese trailers is awful. They always get the same deadpan guy who has no gravitas, no sense of inflection or suspense or drama at all. And I've noticed it in translations of anime as well. The voice work is just horrendous. And in any event, the trailer's dropped, and I'm absolutely excited. And it's a shame it's going to be, what did they say, holiday 2016 before the thing gets here, which I'm not surprised about, especially if they haven't even started making the game, or if they only just now started making the game. Several people from Square have also gone on record saying that if the remake for Final Fantasy VII were to ever happen, it would be one of the most biblically huge undertakings that the company has ever gone through, because they would never do the remake unless they got the original staff from the first game back on board. And I sincerely hope that they've done that. There have already been... screensaver. Well, that was unexpected. There have already been... completely, totally lost my train of thought. I don't care. Oh yeah, found it again. There have already been several stories on the internet about how they're going to flesh out the story a little bit, and some people are nervous about them changing the plot. And quite frankly, I really don't care about that. I know that the main thrust of the plot will remain the same, and of course, with all the additional information that we have from games like Crisis Core and Dirge of Cerberus, I wouldn't mind expanding a little bit more on some of the lore behind the game. Final Fantasy VII definitely had some history behind it that they only touched on in the game. It was one of the reasons why a lot of folks found some of the subplots as confusing as they did. So yeah, I can deal with a little bit more of a fleshed out storyline. Things that I'm looking forward to seeing in the new game. The gameplay, obviously, the most of the time when people make trailers these days, this is actual gameplay footage, and of course it looks fantastic, but Square didn't do that. They've admitted these were just actually rendered cinematics. Having played games like The Order 1886 and seen what you can do now with games, that's attractive. You shut up. I expect nothing less than that. This new Final Fantasy VII game should be just every bit as on the standard as the of graphics that the Order was. I expect absolutely nothing short of that. What am I looking forward to? I'm looking forward to every single last one of the spell graphics, every single one of the materia summons. Knights of the Round in particular just better be something that I can order a pizza and eat while I watch that whole thing play through. I'm really, really looking forward to that. I cannot wait to see what they're going to do with the gold saucer. That's just going to be a riot. And really, while I say I can't wait to see what they're going to do with the gold saucer, it actually kind of worries me a little bit. One of the things that makes the gold saucer as fantastic as it is, that makes that whole game really as fantastic as it is when you dumb the detail down a little bit and make things as cartoonish as they had to back then because they didn't have the tech. Things popped a little bit more and made them, look a little bit more like something out of your imagination. I really hope that the gold saucer continues to look as cool and theme parky and easily distinguished with all the details, and not so busy that you can't appreciate the whole place for what it is. Definitely looking forward to seeing some of the new environments. Definitely looking forward to my first run-in with the Mid-Grizzolum again, and that cutscene later on when you see that Sephiroth has put one up on a pike. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in the game that I'm looking forward to seeing again. It'll be just absolutely fantastic. I told people full stop that even if I was going to be the guy that when I went next gen I bought an Xbone, if they were ever to release Final Fantasy VII again, I would full stop buy the console for that. Especially with Xbox's announcement that they're going to be backwards compatible. I was legitimately considering trading my PlayStation 4 in order to buy an Xbone. Since most of the things that I don't think I have a single exclusive title right now. Excepting The Order, of course. I would regret not playing that, but of course we'll hang on to that now for Final Fantasy VII. That's a full lock. Something that I absolutely want to throw out there now, and I'm interested to see how the public at large, now that all of us who played the game originally when it came out, the primary audience, now that we're all a little bit older, I'm really, really interested to see whether or not this comes out. I've been having a sinking suspicion for a while that maybe that Final Fantasy VII wasn't as great as everybody remembers it was. I know that there have been a lot of I know that there have been a lot of remakes and of the game, and there were different versions on the PC, and they did an HD remake for the PlayStation 3 network, and I think they made a version of it for the Vita as well. And I really do think that a lot of the hype that surrounds Final Fantasy VII had to do with the fact that it came out on the PlayStation, went away from Nintendo, so it was a coup for Sony to get a hold of a franchise whose last installment was Final Fantasy VI, which I'm sorry is still the best game in that entire series. And all of a sudden here you've got Final Fantasy on Sony that everybody was worried that they wouldn't treat the franchise right, and they delivered on a disc-based system, and you've got all the CG and all the pretty, and it just absolutely freaking crushed it. And then you've got the Materia system, which, while horribly broken, damn it, screensaver, while horribly broken and not particularly complex, it was still just a massively enjoyable system to use. Vaguely reminiscent of the Esper system in Final Fantasy VI. I forget the gentleman's name who designs all of the systems, but not nearly as convoluted as the Jobs system or the Junctioning system or the Sphere system in Final Fantasy X. I hear it's just retardedly complicated and big and vast. Really enjoyed all the fun, goofy little things that you could do, and when you find the breaks in the Materia system, it's just a gas and a half to exploit it and wander into a combat situation as a god. But I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I have recent memories. My wife and my nephew and I have tried to play the game relatively recently on our older system, and because of many things, we've had to stop, 2 discs into the game. As a matter of fact, I think it's usually about the time that we get to the Gold Saucer. I do remember the first disc of that game dragging spectacular amounts of ass. And maybe the game's just dull and boring during that first part because you're spending it all wandering around Midgar and you haven't gotten out into the open world yet. Maybe that's what it is. But I can't help but wonder maybe whether or not it's just not as good a game as everybody hypes it up to be. That it was an alright game that took massive advantage of the zeitgeist and the hardware platform that it came out on. I don't know, maybe that's sacrilegious of me, but we will see. I'm really, really interested in the gameplay. I will absolutely play the holy schnot out of it when it comes back again. I don't really have any interest in Final Fantasy 15 or any of the other Final Fantasy games. My very good friend Christy has talked to me once or twice about playing Final Fantasy 14. I think, A Realm Reborn, whatever that is, the MMO for Final Fantasy, and I just can't do it. So I will be interested to see how Final Fantasy VII comes out again when it's remade, but I hope this isn't a sign that Square is dwindling, that they've opted to release this game. If it is a sign that they're dwindling, after you get done with Final Fantasy VII, do us all a favor and remake Final Fantasy VI as you're quietly shuffling yourself out the door. Until then, may your release date be pushed up and not at the expense of the game.